Inside a wall behind the newly sealed cement, authorities found what Germany had been desperately searching for, the body of Anna S. But the story doesn't begin in that basement. It began much earlier, long before Anna's disappearance, with a man who had already unalived multiple victims and had never truly faced the consequences. He had been charged in court time and again, but somehow always managed to slip free. He was a man who wielded manipulation and control to break any woman who crossed his path. His name? Michael S., one of Germany's most sadistic, who would even make videos and document everything he did to his victims, to watch them again and again. And by the time the authorities finally connected the dots and understood the true extent of his darkness, it was already too late for Anna and for so many other women. But before we begin, if you find this video interesting, please give it a like at the end and tell me what you think about the case. It really helps the channel. Let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to subscribe for more. Thank you. This video is created solely for educational and documentary purposes. It does not endorse, glorify, or condone any of the criminal actions or individuals described in this case. Viewer discretion is advised. Anna S. lived a quiet, modest life in Gelsenkirchen, Germany. She was in her mid-30s and worked at a call center, struggling to make ends meet. Her days were simple, centered around work and home. She lived alone in a small apartment with only her two beloved dogs for company. Her closest relationship was with her twin sister, Edith, who lived just 5 minutes away. Anna was content in her routine, but that all changed in late 2018 when she met Michael S. through a dating platform. Michael seemed like a perfect match at first. He was confident, charming, and presented himself as financially stable. He spoke about his family's wealth, particularly about his mother, who owned blocks of flats in Krefeld, a city not far from Gelsenkirchen. Michael's promises of a stable, comfortable life, coupled with his offer of a job at his mother's hotel, sounded tempting. For Anna, though, something didn't sit entirely right, and she was cautious. Anna valued her peace and wasn't ready to rely on anyone else, especially not someone she barely knew. So she politely declined his offer to work at his hotel, preferring to make her own way, but Michael didn't take no for an answer. He insisted on helping her, offering financial support and promising a brighter future. As time passed, Anna couldn't help but feel the weight of his persistence, and despite her reservations, she eventually introduced Michael to Edith and her husband, Dirk. However, the first meeting didn't go as planned. Edith and Dirk, though polite, felt uneasy. Michael's personality was overpowering, loud, self-centered, and always bringing the conversation back to himself. They tolerated him for Anna's sake, but deep down, both Edith and Dirk sensed that something was off. Over time, Anna's growing discomfort with Michael's controlling tendencies became impossible to ignore, and after 6 months, Anna decided to end the relationship. She wanted her space back, the independence she had before, but Michael wouldn't let go. And 3 months later, the unthinkable happened. Anna's apartment caught fire. The blaze ravaged her home, leaving behind only charred remains and the painful loss of her 2 dogs. When the firefighters arrived and extinguished the flames, there was no immediate sign of foul play. The fire had spread quickly, and it looked like a tragic accident, but Anna couldn't help the nagging thought that lingered in the back of her mind. Now, the big question is, was it possible that Michael had something to do with it? The fire felt too coincidental, really. But she didn't want to believe it. But the suspicion remained, growing stronger with every passing day. But this wasn't the first time Michael would be at the center of crimes like this. He had a long history that was really disturbing. His violent tendencies first emerged years earlier, in 1997, with a woman named Christine. At the time, Christine was 22 years old, married but deeply unhappy. Her marriage had deteriorated, and she found herself seeking something different, a distraction from her troubled home life. That distraction came in the form of Michael S., a man who on the surface seemed like the perfect escape. Little did she know that Michael's presence in her life would be far from the solution she was hoping for. Christine met Michael at work, where he was a forklift driver at the metro factory. Michael wasn't physically remarkable. He was overweight, balding, and loud, but he had a way of making people laugh. Perhaps it was his humor or the fact that he made her feel seen, but Christine quickly found herself drawn to him. The affair began innocently enough, full of wild parties, clubbing, and carefree nights, and an escape from her reality. However, over time, Michael began to display obsessive and controlling behavior, traits that would become more apparent as their relationship progressed. Christine eventually moved in with Michael at his mother's hotel. It was supposed to be a fresh start, but that's when things began to take a darker turn. While Michael seemed fun and spontaneous at first, it became clear that he wanted more than just a casual affair. He wanted to control every aspect of her life. His obsession with Christine grew, and he even started insisting that she conform to his desires. But he was not the only person in the picture. His mother, too, played an unsettling role in their relationship. Michael was unnervingly close to his mother, calling her multiple times a day and never defying her. And it became apparent that, for Michael, his mother came first, even before his romantic relationship with Christine, and he was obsessed with giving his mother a grandchild at any cost. And as if the controlling behavior wasn't enough, there was a seemingly small but significant event that triggered Christine's deep suspicion of Michael. When she moved in with him, she brought her dog along. The dog was a beloved companion, but one day, when she returned from work, it was gone. Michael claimed that he had taken the dog to a friend's house, but when Christine tried to track down this so-called friend, she found no one who knew of them. The explanation didn't add up, and Christine knew something had happened to her dog. It was a deep violation that Michael had orchestrated. This was the final straw, and she ended the relationship immediately, moving back to her husband in the hopes of putting it all behind her. However, Michael wasn't done with her yet. On her way to work, Christine noticed that her car's brakes weren't functioning properly, and when she took it to the mechanic, they discovered that someone had replaced her brake fluid with water, a deliberate act of sabotage. Christine immediately suspected Michael, obviously, and she went to the police, but the authorities failed to act swiftly, letting Michael's obsession continue unchecked. He had crossed a line, and Christine could feel the danger closing in. Just like a few similar cases on this channel, Michael began stalking Christine, showing up uninvited at her home, workplace, and even in the places she frequented. His messages, once pleading, grew more threatening. He wasn't just trying to win her back, he was trying to control her. He refused to let her go, and the threats he sent escalated from emotional manipulation to outright intimidation. Christine, desperate to escape Michael's reach, made the decision to transfer to a new job in a different city, hoping this would be the fresh start she needed. But no matter where she went, Michael followed. So, on the night of October 2nd, 1998, Christine and her husband had decided to go out and enjoy themselves. After a period of tension in their marriage, they were trying to reconnect and heal. Later that night, after a fun evening out, Christine and her husband returned home. It would be the last night they would spend together. Around 6 a.m. the next morning, Christine's husband went to check on her. When he walked into the bedroom, he found her body. Christine had been 126 times. The knife had gone so deep that it pierced through the mattress and into the floor beneath her. There was no doubt that this was a crime of rage and not self-defense. However, her clothes were neatly folded beside the bed, a disturbing contrast to the violent crime scene. The door had been locked from the inside, and there were no signs of forced entry. Christine's husband, upon finding her body, immediately called the police. The scene was clear. Michael S. had followed through on his violent threats, and now Christine was dead. The police quickly honed in on Michael as the prime suspect. The evidence was damning. Fibers from Michael's underwear were found on Christine's pillow, linking him directly to the crime scene. When questioned, Michael first denied ever being at Christine's apartment, but as the evidence mounted, his story crumbled. He eventually admitted that he had been there that night, but he continued to deny having any involvement in her death. However, despite overwhelming evidence of his DNA, his obsessive behavior, and his threats, Michael was convicted not of murder, but manslaughter. This lighter charge was a stunning blow to Christine's family because the brutality of the crime clearly warranted a murder conviction. But the court sentenced Michael to just 11 years in prison. Christine's family and the public were outraged. Michael had murdered a young woman, and yet, the court had decided that his actions weren't premeditated enough to warrant a murder conviction. For Michael, this sentence would be just another speed bump. He would serve his time and emerge once again, ready to continue his violent path. This was the first chapter of Michael S.'s reign of terror. In fact, Michael was soon back on the streets after his period of probation to continue his reign of terror, with even more victims in his wake. In 2013, a street worker became one of Michael's victims. Like many before her, She was struggling to make ends meet, relying on her work to survive. When she met Michael, at first it seemed like a simple business transaction. He was a regular customer, but Michael had a way of worming his way into people's lives. He offered her more than money. He promised her a fresh start and told her about a place to stay, a job at his mother's hotel, and an apprenticeship that would allow her to build a life, and to someone in her position, it felt like salvation. But what seemed like a lifeline was, in reality, another trap. Michael's control over her tightened slowly but steadily. He started to manipulate her, asserting his dominance in subtle ways at first, and it wasn't long before he began isolating her from others. He wanted her to depend on him, emotionally and financially, and when she tried to set boundaries, his true nature came to the surface. Fearing the growing control he had over her, the woman tried to put some distance between them and lied to him, claiming she had a child to care for, hoping this would create enough of an excuse for her to leave. But Michael wouldn't let her go that easily. His possessiveness only deepened. It was after this lie that Michael's behavior became more violent. An attack on the woman followed, where he assaulted her physically and almost unalived her before he then changed his mind. She managed to escape and reported him to the police. But being a street worker, she was not taken seriously, as she was told her claim wasn't substantial and dismissed it. However, following the violent attack, the woman began receiving texts warning her that her life was in immediate danger. The message came from an unknown source, but what was even more alarming was the content of the text. The sender claimed that Michael had hired someone to abduct her, and the message even included proof. Michael's handwriting with a detailed plan, outlining her daily routine and where she could be found. It seemed clear Michael had put someone up to abducting her. She immediately went to the police, but once again, the authorities failed to act with the urgency the situation required. The police did not seem to fully understand the gravity of the threat Michael posed. Yet, when the woman received further proof of the planned abduction photos, notes, and detailed instructions, the police finally took her claim seriously, and this led to Michael's eventual arrest. Despite the horrifying details of his actions, Michael was sentenced to just 2.5 years in prison. However, he appealed, claiming his innocence, and his next court hearing was delayed for 5 years, and once again, he was allowed to walk free. A shocking reality that would allow him to continue terrorizing others. His next victim, Stephanie L., became another tragic chapter in his twisted story. Stephanie had known hardship all her life, a young mother who had fled an abusive relationship in hopes of giving herself and her son a better life. The journey had been difficult, and the scars of her past still weighed heavily on her. But just as she thought she might be able to rebuild, Michael S. entered her life. And once again, she was lured into a trap that seemed like salvation at first. Michael, with his well-rehearsed charm, offered Stephanie everything she thought she needed: a place to stay, an apprenticeship at his mother's hotel, and financial support to help her get back on her feet. It felt like a miracle, a second chance. Eager to escape her past and build a stable future, Stephanie moved into Michael's apartment complex, unaware that the walls surrounding her would soon become her prison. At first, things seemed to go well. Stephanie settled into her new routine, and Michael appeared to be the helpful and generous man he had promised to be. But, as with the others before her, his true nature began to reveal itself. Slowly, Michael's controlling behavior started to surface. He wanted to know where she was at all times, who she was with, and what she was doing. He didn't respect her boundaries, and the lines between concern and manipulation began to blur, and what was once offered as a fresh start turned into another trap. Stephanie had once requested some amount of money from him. He got violent, physically attacked her, dragged her into her apartment, and forced himself on her. She then confided in a friend, who encouraged her to file a complaint against Michael. She told the authorities about his controlling behavior, the way he had begun to dictate her every move, but the police didn't take immediate action. It was as if her words had fallen on deaf ears. And once again, Michael was free to continue his manipulation. Then, in early 2017, tragedy struck. Stephanie was found dead in her apartment. The official cause of death was determined to be an overdose, a simple and tragic ending to a young woman's life. The police ruled it as such, despite the signs that suggested something more evil had been at play. Michael, the man who had offered her a lifeline only to take it away, was not charged. Despite his history and the growing suspicion surrounding him, he was allowed to walk free once again. To the authorities, it seemed like just another case of overdose. But to those who knew Stephanie, and those who were beginning to see Michael's true colors, it was clear that her death was far from ordinary. And this was his last victim before Anna. By now, the full extent of Michael's manipulation had become clear. He was no longer just the man who had once been a part of Anna's life. He had become the shadow that lurked behind every corner, a constant presence she couldn't escape. After their breakup, Michael did everything in his power to reassert control over Anna's life. He got her gifts and even got her a new dog. But what Anna didn't realize, and what no one could have foreseen, was just how far Michael was willing to go to keep her in his life. It began with small lies that played on her emotions. He invented a wealthy, benevolent aunt living in Switzerland who supposedly wanted to help Anna financially. Anna told his supposed aunt her dream to own a daycare, and she promised to support her. Not long after, a check of 70,000 and 540,000 euros arrived in the mail for Anna, but it was all a lie. It was all Michael trying to creep back into her life, but this was not enough to convince Anna. The story seemed almost too good to be true, but Anna had heard enough to recognize the manipulation. Then there were the suicide threats. He sent in desperate messages begging her to come back. He claimed he couldn't live without her and that if she left, he would end it all. These were the kinds of messages designed to make Anna feel guilty, and it worked, at least for a moment. Anna could no longer ignore the mounting pressure from Michael, the subtle but powerful way he was forcing her to reconsider her decision. The morning of her disappearance, Anna seemed at peace and had plans to visit Michael to see how he was doing, but reassured Edith that afterward they would sit together in the garden, just as they always did. The day unfolded as expected at first, but when Edith received a message from Anna later that day, something felt wrong. It wasn't the content of the message that raised suspicion, it was the tone. The text was filled with emojis, something Anna never used. Her sister, knowing her as well as anyone, instantly felt that something was off. And then, as hours passed without another word from Anna, Edith's worry grew, and the day slipped by with no further messages, and the familiar reassurance that came from Anna's usual texts was nowhere to be found. Edith tried again, sending another message. Again, no reply. This time, panic set in. The following morning, Edith couldn't wait any longer. She called her husband, Dirk, and they decided to go to Anna's apartment to check on her. They were both uneasy, but still hopeful that this was just a misunderstanding and that Anna had simply been busy. However, as they arrived, they could hear Anna's dogs barking frantically inside the apartment, but the door was locked. They knocked, called out, but there was no response, and Edith's instincts screamed that something wasn't right. Without hesitation, Edith called the fire department. They arrived quickly and began breaking down the door, and when they finally gained access to the apartment, it was as though Anna had simply vanished. Her belongings were all there, nothing out of place. A dirty plate sat in the sink, as though she had been preparing to clean up. Her dogs were inside, but Anna was nowhere to be found. The police were alerted immediately, and within hours they began their investigation. Given the suspicious circumstances, they quickly honed in on one person, Michael. The detectives were already aware of Anna's troubled history with him, and it didn't take long for them to start piecing things together. A raid was conducted at Michael's apartment in Krefeld, hoping to find any evidence that could lead to Anna's whereabouts. Cadaver dogs were brought in to search for traces of her. They scoured every corner, sniffed every surface, but came up with nothing. It was as though Anna had never been there. But the police weren't ready to give up. They seized Michael's laptop and hard drives, hoping that digital evidence might reveal what had happened to Anna. The hope was that the computer might hold the answers, emails, messages, or files that could give them a lead. Michael, unaware of the growing evidence against him, was being watched, and the police placed him under surveillance. His behavior, however, revealed more than they could have hoped for. One evening, while under constant watch, Michael was overheard speaking to his mother on the phone. "They don't even have a body," Michael bragged, "so they have nothing." He laughed. His confidence seemed to imply that he believed he had outsmarted them. But this time, the police were closing in, and the evidence was stacking up. They had no physical evidence to link him directly to the crime. However, it was what Michael had left behind on his laptop that would finally make the case unshakable. As investigators sifted through the digital files, the horror they uncovered was beyond anything they had expected. A disturbing video emerged, showing Anna's lifeless body, her tattoos confirming her identity. Michael had filmed himself beside her remains, his actions far worse than anyone could have imagined. He had desecrated her, urinating on her body in an act of vile, calculated cruelty. But it didn't stop there. The laptop also revealed something even more disturbing, a series of searches that left nothing to the imagination. How to get rid of a body. How to hide a body permanently. These searches were not just incidental. They were a damning reflection of his intent. Michael had been planning Anna's murder, and he had taken steps to cover it up. With the digital evidence in hand, Michael's arrest for Anna's murder was sealed, but still, there was the matter of Anna's body. Despite the video, despite the search history, the police had yet to uncover where Michael had hidden her, and that detail would come later. But for now, they had enough to bring him to trial. On November 26, 2019, Michael S. was officially arrested and charged with the murder of Anna S. The trial began in December 2020, and as the court was presented with the evidence, Michael's lack of remorse became glaringly obvious. A man who viewed his victims as nothing more than objects to be discarded when they no longer served his purpose. During the trial, the details of his cruelty were laid bare. The video of Anna's desecration was shown to the court, and though it was a heavy moment for her family, it was necessary. The judge was unflinching in his assessment of Michael's actions. He was not just a man who had committed murder, he was a danger to anyone who became involved with him. Michael was sentenced to life in prison, which in Germany meant 25 years, but he was also given an additional 10 years to ensure he won't be eligible for release until he is in his 80s. In the end, Michael S. would never again hurt another woman, but the scars of his actions would never truly heal. However, in March of 2022, more than 2 years after Michael S. was convicted and sentenced, a seemingly ordinary day turned into something extraordinary. Michael's mother, in the midst of clearing out the basement of the building she owned, stumbled upon something that felt off. As she touched the wall, she noticed that a section of concrete felt fresher than the rest, and it wasn't like the other walls. It seemed newly added, as if someone had sealed something behind it. Something was hidden there, and she immediately contacted the authorities, and what happened next would shock the whole country. When the police arrived and began to break through the concrete, the truth that had eluded them for so long was about to be uncovered. The wall cracked open, revealing the hidden secret that Michael had buried away. Inside the concrete barrier, in a space only Michael had access to, lay Anna's remains. There, in the very building where Michael had lived and worked, Anna's body had been concealed, trapped behind the wall like a forgotten piece of his violent history. Her family had searched for years, never knowing where she had been, desperately clinging to the hope that they might one day bring her home. Finally, after all this time, their worst fears were confirmed, but at the same time, their long wait for closure had come to an end. For Anna's family, the discovery brought a bittersweet sense of relief. The uncertainty, the pain of not knowing that had tortured them for so long, and after everything Michael had done, they could finally give their daughter, sister, and loved one the peace she deserved. After years of anguish, the case was reevaluated, and the authorities now had a clear, final piece of evidence to tie the entire tragedy together. This case actually gives me goosepimples, a chilling reminder not to trust anyone out there because monsters in human form are still walking the earth today. Now, we'd like to hear from you. What do you think could have been done differently by the justice system to prevent something like this from ever happening again? Share your thoughts in the comments below. We read every one of them. If this story moved you, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more true, deeply researched crime stories. Thank you for watching and stay safe.